Hey everyone, this is the first in a kind of mini series of 3 or maybe even 4 piano tutorials in which I'm going to show you how to take a basic song, so melody and chords, and turn it into a cocktail style piano solo, something a little bit like this. I know loads of you really love cocktail piano, lounge piano, call it what you like, this kind of lovely, free and easy jazzy style. It's super fun to learn, it's very forgiving to play, and the great thing about cocktail is that it can help you sharpen up an awful lot of practical and theoretical skills that you can then use in more challenging styles like fast jazz. It's also just a ton of fun in its own right. So like I said, there are going to be 3 or 4 tutorials in the series, and as I make subsequent ones, what I'm going to do is add them to a playlist and put a link to that playlist in the description text right underneath this video on its YouTube watch page. So once you've finished this first tutorial, you'll know where to find the next one. I've made quite a few tutorials on cocktail piano in the past and even written a popular ebook that you might like to check out, An Introduction to Cocktail Piano. Now it's usually £9.95, that's UK pounds, but right now you can get it as part of a bundle deal that I'm running alongside the digital editions of 2 of my other books, How to Really Play the Piano and 7 Studies in Pop Piano. You get all 3 of them in that bundle for £18.95, which is a 30% saving on what you'd pay if you bought them separately. And if you've bought one of them in the past, don't worry, you can still get a discount on the other 2. Now if you just want to check out and buy An Introduction to Cocktail Piano by itself, then head over to billspianopages.com/cocktail. But if you're interested in that bundle deal, all 3 books for £18.95, head over to billspianopages.com/bundle. I'll talk a little bit more about the cocktail book later in this tutorial, because if you like this stuff, you're going to find it mega useful. For now though, let's get on and look at the song that we're going to learn in this series of tutorials. Okay, so we're going to be looking at this thing in score, that is to say as written music. Now if you can't read music, or if your music reading is a little bit shaky, don't worry, because you'll still be able to follow these tutorials. What I'm going to do is play through the melody lines really carefully so that you can follow them. Anyway, here's the song in what we call lead sheet form. It's just a little thing that I've knocked together kind of in classic jazz show tune kind of style. As you can see, I've called it from scratch, and it is almost a typical lead sheet. I say almost because a typical lead sheet will include melody, chords and lyrics, but I haven't written any lyrics for this thing and they would just get in the way anyway. So what we have here is melody and chords. Now the idea of a lead sheet is that it gives you all of the basic information that you need to create a performance of a song, and that's what we've got here. We can take this melody line and these chords to create a solo of the type that I demonstrated right at the start of the tutorial. Before we start messing around with from scratch, let's have a look at its structure. By the way, you can download this lead sheet as a PDF, which you might find easier if you can print it off and so on. Just look out for a link in the description text right underneath this video. Now the structure we're looking at here is an A-A-B-A structure. Incredibly common in this kind of song, probably the most common song structure in show music and jazz. What it is an 8-bar A section, an 8-measure A section if you prefer the US terminology, followed by another 8-bar A section which is nearly identical apart from its very ending. Then there's a B section which we call the middle section or the middle 8 or the bridge, and then there's a final A section. And when you get to the end of the final A section, it's either the end of the song or you go back to the beginning for another playthrough. In today's tutorial, we're just going to look at the very first A section and explore how we can play around with it. So to start with, we just need to familiarise ourselves with these first 8 bars, these first 8 measures that comprise the first A section. What I'll do is just play the melody by itself first with the magic keyboard at the top of the screen so you can see exactly what I'm doing, but then I'll play it again with some chords underneath in the left hand, just very simple block chords so you can get a feeling for how melody and harmony are working together. Okay, so melody to start with. What I'm going to do is count in 4 beats and then beat time as we go. Okay, just for now we're going to stick to a fairly steady beat. Later on we'll talk about speeding up and slowing down and using rubato and so on, but just for now, just as we're learning this tune, I want us to stick to a fairly solid beat. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there I'm stopping after the third beat of bar 8, because in the fourth beat of bar 8 we've got the pickup for the next A section, again the A and the C. Okay, let's try that again, but now let's put the chords underneath. What I'm going to do is play those chords more or less exactly as they're notated in the lead sheet, with one or two slight variations, because for example A minor 11 is too big a chord to play in one hand, so I'm going to play that A minor 11 in the left, very common way of doing it. I'm going to play it like that. And likewise with D minor 9, I'll probably just play a D minor 7 and rely on the right to fill in the ninth. Don't worry if you're not familiar with these chord terms, by the way, because we're going to be going through them shortly. Okay, once again against a fairly strict beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. One really important thing I just want you to bear in mind, especially if you are a music reader, usually when you see jazz songs, cocktail songs, anything really from the jazz or swing eras or written in that kind of style, it's kind of expected that you'll add a little bit of rhythmic swing to it, yeah? In a full kind of posh piano score, that might be indicated. It might say at the top, play with an easy swing, or there might be some kind of symbol suggesting that you should apply swing. But if you've got a lead sheet, it will almost never tell you to apply swing. It will just be expected that you'll recognise what kind of music it is and apply swing naturally. And I was doing that quite subtly when I was playing through just then. There was just a very gentle swing on it. So I wasn't playing exactly as it was written. I was playing it as it was written, but with a bit of a swing, and that manifested itself in a couple of places. So if you were listening carefully, for example, towards the end of the third full bar, the third full measure, where we've got that D augmented chord, and over the top we've got the A, B flat A, I'll have played it something like this. Now probably of those three notes, the third one, the final A quaver, 8th note, will have been just a little bit shorter than the quaver, the 8th note that came before the B flat. And that's because of where they fall in the swing, okay? Now if you're not used to swing, it's something that just takes a little bit of experience to get to grips with, okay? You need to listen to a little bit of jazzy music and kind of get the feel for it, because it's difficult to plan. Just be aware though that that is what is going on there. All throughout, every time you hear me playing this, I will naturally be applying a little bit of swing. So we've got our first 8 bars, the first A section of our song. Now let's think about how we can start to make them into the beginnings of a cocktail piano solo. Now the first thing we need to do is think about what you might call the elements of the cocktail piano style, and I would say that there are 3 of them. First of all, it's free and easy. Secondly, there is quite a bit of decoration. And thirdly, we have harmonic richness. Let's go through those one at a time. Free and easy. Yeah, cocktail piano is usually pretty chilled out. Sometimes it's very chilled out, okay? Sometimes it's dead slow. But you know, and at other times it's just the slightly more movement there. Today we're probably at the slightly more movement end of things, because we're going to be adding a stride pattern in the left hand. But even so, it is quite chilled out. There's a lot of rubato, a lot of playing around with time, a lot of speeding up, slowing down, pausing for effect, that kind of thing. And that's one of the things that makes cocktail a very forgiving style to learn. You're not tied to a really tyrannical beat. Number 2, like I said, it uses lots of decoration. Okay, there are runs, there are jumping chords. Okay, various bits and pieces like that. And very often we are getting into the higher octaves of the piano. Yeah, a lot of cocktail piano decoration gets into these upper octaves, and there is a reason for that. Okay, cocktail piano is designed to be played at parties or in bars, and the piano player wants the sound to cut through the background chatter and noise. Yeah, and there are 2 ways of doing that. First of all, you can just play really loud, but that wouldn't kind of be in keeping with the rest of the style. Or you can make a lot of use of the upper register of the piano, okay, where those high pitches will really cut through. So we have a lot of decoration, often using these higher octaves of the piano. Thirdly, we have harmonic richness, these lovely rich chords, okay, which often appear in the repertoire we're playing anyway. A lot of classic jazz songs have these kind of chords. But with Cocktail, we kind of make a meal of them. So we're using extensions, we're using substitutions, we're making the chords a little bit richer than necessarily you would expect if you were just looking at the lead sheet. So to start with, you kind of need to get a feeling for this free and easy swinging style that we use when we play Cocktail. If you've never played in this way before, I suggest the first thing you do is spend some time just playing around with the melody in the right hand, and that's also going to be a really good way of getting that melody in your head. Let me show you the kind of thing I mean. I'm just going to play through the first 4 bars, the first 4 measures of the A section, but this time I'm going to mess around with the timing, okay? See if you can spot the differences between what I'm about to do and what I did a few minutes ago when I played in really strict time and I played more or less exactly what was written. Here we go. I was exaggerating things a little bit there, so hopefully you spotted it and how it was different from the strict time version. But just to make it stand out a little bit more clearly, let me do the same thing again, the same kind of thing again, but this time I'll put a stride pattern, a simple stride pattern in the left hand, so you can get a sense of how the melody falls against the chord changes when you start to play around with it. Here we go. Into the second 4 bars of that first A section. Okay, let's have a look at a couple of important things that are going on there. First of all, what's happening with the underlying beat? Now, like I said earlier, when we're playing Cocktail piano, there's a range of things we can do with the beat. Sometimes, at one extreme, we play in such a chilled out, such a slow style that there is virtually no discernible beat at all. Okay, that's a reasonably common thing to happen. But then at the other end of the range, we have something like what's happening today, where we do have a discernible beat. It's quite a clear 4/4. I'm marking it using this stride pattern in the left hand. But even so, it's still relatively chilled out. It's still relatively languorous. I'm feeling free, especially sometimes just to slow down a little bit, to ease off before going back to tempo. Slow down, go back to tempo. And typically I'm doing that just when I think it sounds good according to the kind of feeling that I'm after. Let me demonstrate the kind of thing I mean. I'll just play through the first 2 or 3 bars in the same style that I was doing a few minutes ago, really playing around with the rhythms in the right hand. Just listen to the end of bar 2, okay? Here we go. Okay, did you see what happened there? I put in a deliberate pause. Let me play that bar again. Exaggerated it a little bit there, okay? But even so, I was pausing at the end of a phrase. Understanding what musical phrases are is really useful. A melodic phrase is a short fragment of melody that kind of makes sense as a whole, but typically ends on a longer note. So is a clear phrase, okay? And I just pause at the end of the phrase before starting the next phrase. Yeah, not by very much, but just enough to give that kind of little bit of feeling of being very relaxed and easygoing, okay, which is so important when we're playing Cocktail. Being able to pause like that is also really useful. It's one of the things that makes Cocktail a very forgiving style to play, because it means you can stop and think sometimes. So you get to the end of the phrase, right, what am I going to do next? Little pause. Yes. So it buys you just a little bit of time, more time than you would usually have to think about what is happening next. So play around with that, starting in the right hand, like I said. Just play with some pauses, introduce them where you think it makes sense to introduce them. Second, I'm using quite a bit of rhythmic anticipation, okay, and that means I'm sometimes bringing in a note slightly ahead of where it would land if I were playing the score just exactly as it's written. So a really good example of that is right at the start. When I was playing just now and a few minutes ago, the first D of the melody I actually brought in ahead of the beat. And here, so the D that appears under the A minor 11 chord I brought in early. That E came in early. I just did that A under the G minor 9. Yeah, that second full bar in particular is really handy to use rhythmic anticipation there, because if you played it exactly as written, to my mind that sounds a bit kind of a bit too sing-song. Yeah, I think that that A is a natural place to put some anticipation in. And in fact, when I wrote this, I anticipated, if you'll excuse the pun, that whoever was playing it would put some anticipation in here. So this is a really important point. Just in the same way that writers of this kind of music will anticipate that you're going to put swing in, often they will also anticipate that you will put anticipation in, if you see what I mean, rhythmic anticipation. And often you will find that scores like this are kind of approximations in some ways, and that if you know they're going to be played in a jazzy, a cocktail style or whatever, it's kind of expected that you'll know about the swing, you'll know about the anticipation and things like that. So like I said, if you're really new to this, and especially if you're really used to playing scores exactly as they're written, just spend some time playing around with it, just in the right hand to start with. We'll look at the left in a second. Everything we're doing here falls under the general description of rubato, a really old-fashioned technique that's been around for centuries, but which is really important to cocktail and loads of other styles. This idea that you can take the rhythms, you can take the beat and play around with them to suit the sound that you're after. Now, the second of our essential three features of cocktail piano that I mentioned is decoration. These fancy jumps and runs that we use to make the most of the whole spread of the piano keyboard. But I want to park decoration for now. I'm going to talk about that in tutorial 2. And the reason for that is that today I think it's important that you can start playing this A section and start practicing it in a basic way with two hands together, so we've got a good foundation in place before we move on to tutorial number 2. So decoration we're going to discuss in detail in the second tutorial. Right now I want to deal with the left hand so we can start putting hands together, and that means thinking a little bit about the third of our essential features, which is cocktail harmony. In other words, we need to think about some chords to go with our right hand melody. The harmonies we use in cocktail are a really important part of the overall sound, and we're going to spend quite a lot of time across all of this series of tutorials looking at how to create cool harmonies to go with the melody. For today though, what I want to do is pin down exactly what these basic chords are and how they work. Okay, so I'm going to go through the chords that underlie this A section so we can use them to put together a provisional left hand. We're not going to go deeply into harmonic extension and substitution in this tutorial. We're just going to get comfortable with these basic chords, which are actually pretty interesting all by themselves. So let's have a look at the chords for the first A section, bars 1 to 8, because of course once you've learnt these chords for bars 1 to 8, then you'll know 3/4 of the chords for the whole song, because the 8-bar A section crops up 3 times in our 32-bar AA-BA sequence. What I'm going to do is play the chords across two hands to start with so you can kind of get a sense of their sound, but then in a moment we'll look at how to start building a left hand's part out of them. Now when I'm playing these chords, remember as always that I could play them in lots and lots of different ways, lots of different voicings and inversions. What makes a piano chord is the notes it contains, not the number of notes you play or the order you play them in. So this is a chord of F, okay? But so is that, and so is this, and so is that. Okay, all of those chords just contain the notes F, A and C. There are different numbers of them, they appear in different orders, but F, A and C, no more, no less. So that's what makes it a chord of F. By the way, if you're just getting into piano chords and you need a little bit of extra help, do check out my book, How to Really Play the Piano, the Stuff Your Teacher Never Taught You. It's got a full kind of introduction to piano chords in there, and you can of course get that at the moment as part of that bundle deal that also includes my ebook, An Introduction to Cocktail Piano, which kind of explores cocktail chords a bit more. You can get that plus my other book, 7 Studies in Pop Piano, all for £18.95 at the moment. So once again, do check out that bundle deal at billspianopages.com/bundle. So here we go, all of the A section chords in order. Now if you look at the lead sheet, you'll see that nearly every bar in each A section has 2 chords in it, with each chord assigned 2 beats. So in our very first bar, right at the start of the first A section, after the pickup beat, we start with 2 beats of F6. Okay, so a regular F chord with an added 6th, a D, which also crops up in the melody, yeah? Really distinctive sound. Then we have 2 beats of A minor 11. Unplayable in one hand, so if you did have to play it in one hand, for example in the left, you would almost always use an abbreviated form of the chord. I used that one. Okay, so essentially it has the same character as A minor 11. We've got that D in there that's giving us the 11th sound, and we've got the root and 5th of the basic chord plus the 7th, but we're missing out the 3rd and the 9th. Okay, so there's no B and C in there, but we could call that an A minor 11. There are other shapes that we could use as abbreviations for A minor 11. That's quite a good one as well. We have got the 3rd in there, but we don't have the 5th. It's just giving us the same kind of character. Now, playing cocktail piano, the only time you're ever going to hear a full 11th chord is if there's some quite funky chordal improvisation going on in both hands, or for example, if you were using the upper structure of that chord to create decoration. So at some point you could do something like this. Okay, basic A minor shape here. I've got 7, 9, 11 there, and I'm using that upper part of the chord to create a little bit of decoration. Okay, so you might do that sometimes, but most of the time when you come across an 11th chord like that, it's going to be in some kind of abbreviated form. Then on to bar 2, we've got 2 beats of D minor 9. Okay, a regular D minor 7 chord plus the 9th, and what I was doing when I was playing through back then was using D minor 7 and relying on the melody to give me that E, just a little touch of the E there to give it the D minor 9 feeling. The other thing you could do there, if you didn't have the 9th in the melody, is play what we would call a rootless voicing. Okay, so instead of playing D minor 7, you will play the D minor 9 but without its root, what is in effect an F major 7 chord, but which would still have the same character as D minor 9. You'll be getting that 9th kind of feeling. Okay, so a couple of things you can do there. Ditto, exactly the same thing with G minor 9, the second 2 beats of bar 2. Then in bar 3 we start off with 2 beats of F major 7. Then we have 2 beats of D augmented, which I've notated as D plus. Sometimes you'll see it notated as D aug, D-A-U-G. Yeah. We're going to be exploring various problems to do with that D augmented chord, because an augmented chord like that doesn't have the 5th of the regular major chord. Okay, so instead of playing the regular major chord, we're taking the A and sharpening it by a note, augmenting it to have that. The A has disappeared, but we have the A in the melody line here. Yeah, so dealing with that crunch, whether we embrace it or we work our way around it, is a problem, an issue we're going to address later in the series, because it's quite an interesting thing, the kind of little problem that you have to deal with reasonably regularly. So there we go. That takes us to the end of bar 3, D augmented. Bar 4, we have another 2 beats of G minor 9, and then 2 beats of C7. Yeah, and that C7 is going to be a dead ringer for some substitution later. So we're going to be taking that plain vanilla C7 later on in the series and replacing it with more exciting things like a tritone substitution or a diminished substitution, and so on and so forth. But more on that later in the series. Then bar 5 and bar 6 really repeat what happens in bars 1 and 2. There's an awful lot of repetition in this progression, as there are in many song progressions. Okay, so in bar 5, 2 beats of F6, then 2 beats of A minor 11, then bar 6, 2 beats of D minor 9, and then 2 beats of G minor 9, and then in bar 7, 2 beats of straightforward B flat, 2 beats of straightforward C7, which again we might substitute, we'll come on to that later, and then in bar 8 we have a solid bar, a full bar of F, although you might end up playing F major 7 or F6 or something like that. Okay, so a little bit of a whistle-stop tour there. What we need to do now is work out how we can translate those chords into a left hand that we can use under the melody line that we've been working on. Well, in the next tutorial in the series, we're going to look at how to use this kind of free and easy stride pattern in the left hand that I've been using to mark out the beat. And in fact, if you're a more experienced player, you could have a go at using that right now. If you're not so experienced though, what you need to prioritise is just getting your two hands working together, and the easiest way of doing that is to play around with your right hand melody just over some simple block chords in the left hand. Let me show you the kind of thing I mean and then talk about the exact shapes that I'm using. Here we go. Once again, I'll be fairly kind of rubato in the right hand. What I was doing there was using a mixture of full chords, like my F6, and shells. So there's a G minor 7 shell, which I could use with a G minor 7 or a G minor 9 or a G minor 11 or whatever. A shell chord is a jazz piano technique where we take just the root and the 7th note of a chord, and it has to be at least a 7th for this to work, and play it instead of the full chord. And the idea is that it implies the full chord. It gives the listener's ear enough information to make sense of the harmony, okay? And the chances are that in the final performance, we're also going to be filling in harmonic information in the right hand, okay, under the melody or whatever. So it's not a big deal that we have notes from the chord in the left missing. The advantage of shells is that they don't sound as muddy and messy as a full chord would this far down the piano. Okay, so let's think about what you need to practice before you move on to the next tutorial in the series. First of all, get this A section melody down, yeah? Get it under your fingers so you can play it without really thinking about it. To start with, you might want to play it in fairly strict time, but then after a while, begin to play around with your rubato. Secondly, work on your left hand. To start with, I would just play it in isolation. Okay, work out some good chord shapes, familiarise yourself with the A section progression, and as you begin to get confident, try putting the melody on top, try putting the two together. Now, if you're relatively new to this kind of thing, that might take some time. Maybe expect to give this stage a good week, maybe even 2 weeks of practice, yeah? But it will really pay off if you're diligent and get these foundations down early. Then we can begin to build on them and start to do really exciting, really cool cocktaily things. So that's it for this tutorial. Now, in the second tutorial in the series, which will be coming out in a few days' time if you're watching them as they're published, we're going to focus on making this whole thing sound bigger with kind of richer harmonies, lusher sounds, bit of decoration, more movement in the left hand, and so on. Remember, you'll be able to find that tutorial once it's published in the playlist, which you'll find linked in the description text below. Just another reminder to check out my books, especially an introduction to cocktail piano, which I think you'll really like if you've enjoyed this video. Lots of people have bought and liked it in the past, and of course right now you can get it as part of that bundle deal with 2 of my other ebooks over at billspianopages.com/bundle. That's about it then. Remember to hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already subscribed to my channel, and do please follow me on social media. Facebook, Twitter and Instagram links are below, as is a link to my Patreon crowdfunding page. Yeah, I have loads of supporters on Patreon. We have a really good time, we have a really good community over there, and you get several really quite special benefits if you're a Patreon supporter. So there we go, get practicing this cocktail stuff, and I'll see you in the second tutorial in the series.